On the line with us, Zoe Carpenter, assistant Washington editor at The Nation magazine, just back from the Oregon standoff, or whatever we call that. The website, of course, thenation.com. You can tweet Zoe at ZOES Carpenter or at The Nation. Zoe, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
Thanks for joining us. So why aren't the Bundy militia being arrested?
Well, I think everyone in law enforcement is interested in avoiding some sort of violent confrontation that could be used to amplify the Bundy and company's claims that they're being persecuted by a tyrannical government. And the wildlife refuge is 30 miles away from the nearest town of Burns. It's winter; there's nobody out there looking at birds, and so I think the immediate danger of an armed conflict there is pretty low, although there have been threats made against some people in town, people related to law enforcement or federal employees. There have been reports of stalking and things like that.
So, wow. Is it true that that Harney County, there's fewer than 10,000 people in that county. It's mostly poor, white, and conservative. And I understand that not one single person from the county has joined the Bundy militia. Is that the case?
That was what I was told by Ammon Bundy himself on Monday. Ammon is one of the leaders of this group. And he chalked that up to the cold weather. He said, they're just more comfortable in their houses. But really, the sense that I got from talking with people in town is that even if they supported some of the claims that are being made by the Bundy militia, such as claims to that land, claims that the federal government is making it harder for ranchers and other people in that area to survive, they didn't agree with the tactics.
Right.
The militants are mostly from out of state, and none of them are from Burns, as far as I could tell, as of Monday at least. And so people in town are wondering what the heck they're doing there.
Yeah. How do you see this thing playing out? What are you hearing from law enforcement? And why is it that the FBI is letting people come and go from that site? It seems that if the goal is to ultimately arrest people for trespassing, that when they leave to go get supplies, you would stop and arrest them individually, one at a time, as they leave the place to go into town to buy food and things.
That's a really good question. I'm not in Burns anymore, so I don't have the latest directly from law enforcement. I have heard that they are working on a solution, but they haven't released any details. So I'm not sure if they're waiting to have some sort of grand strategy in place for a resolution before they start arresting people. But it does certainly lend to the sense that the Bundy family and his supporters are acting with impunity and have been for several years.
Yeah. Well, and that's certainly the case. I mean, Cliven still owes over $1 million, and he's still grazing his cattle on federal land, to the best of my knowledge, and not paying for it, and he's not suffering any consequences. In fact, it's the flip side of that. He's been raising piles of money on the internet as a result of all his appearances on Fox News up until he started lecturing us all about the Negro, which kind of put a kibosh on that, and I think it's hurting his son's efforts, but. How is this migrating across the white supremacy sphere?
Well, I think it's created quite a bit of controversy. I know that some militia groups, like the Oath Keepers, who have previously supported the Bundys and have supported land conflicts such as this one, are actually not participating in the armed standoff because, although I shouldn't really call it a standoff, it's not exactly standoff, are not participating in the occupation of the refuge because they didn't agree with the manner in which it was initiated. It was, it happened quite suddenly and without the consent of local people.
Yeah, so we had Sheriff Richard Mack on this program 2 or 3 days ago, and he, who founded the Oath Keepers, and he said, no, we're not supporting these guys.
Right. Yeah. So I think although they certainly are part of a broader trend, which is the rise of the right-wing militias under the Obama administration, they're actually quite isolated in this current operation.
Wouldn't it be more factual or whatever the word is, higher journalistic integrity or whatever, to refer to these guys as white right-wing militias rather than just right-wing militias? Because these are basically... Well, I've never seen a person of color in any of these things.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what the practical benefit of identifying their
I think
homogeneity would be.
the well of rage that is animating, I think, a majority of these people is racism. I grew up in Michigan. I knew some guys who are part of the Michigan militia right now, or at least were a decade ago, and they're white racists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think certainly there is that character.
Or white supremacists.
Right. And I think what's interesting is if you compare the treatment of this group with other types of protest, although I hesitate to call this a protest, such as people in Ferguson, I think there is that clear imbalance. However, I think that the right question to ask is, why don't we treat other types of demonstrations with the same kind of restraint? Not, why don't we go in with guns blazing in this situation? Because that would only justify that kind of excessive use of police power.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. It just and the hypocrisy, the whole thing is just so laid bare. But anything else, Zoe, that you want to share with us that you learned from your time in Oregon that you thought was interesting?
Well, I think a couple of things to watch will be how the reaction from the local people ends up influencing the militants and the occupation. There's been some conflicting signals from the Bundy brothers themselves about whether, how long they'll stay, how much they're going to listen to local people, and whether those internal divisions end up widening is something to pay attention to. Mm-hmm. And I'll just close with saying that, Bundy is really preying on real grievances in Harney County. As you mentioned, 21% of the people in the county are living in poverty. And so I think one thing that is worth paying attention to is the question of what should be done to help rural counties in places like Oregon. The answer, if you look at the economics, is not to give federal land back to a handful of ranchers, but surely their grievances are important.
Right. A good first step would be to put our economy back together,
right.
Stop our crazy trade policies, bring our factories back, give people, an economy that works. But that's a whole nother rant. That's and that's kind of the antithesis of the TPP rant. Mm-hmm. Zoe Carpenter, you're doing great work.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for being with us. The assistant Washington editor with The Nation magazine, thenation.com is the website. To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.